In this module, my dear scholars, we are going to learn and speak about Greek philosophy of management. In other words, we are talking about 500 BC. अच्छा, वैसे management theories जो आप journals और books में पढ़ रहे हैं, most of them they were developed in the 1900s. लेकिन you will find the influence of the ideas and the scholarly contributions of these Greek philosophers on the administration and the management of, to begin with, Roman empires. We'll talk about Roman Empire, but let's first look at these three philosophers, about 500 BC, how they presented the concepts of management. Plato, about 460 BC. And notice the statement which this scholar, this philosopher is reading, is presenting. He says, a city comes into being. What is the reason of a city? And remember, in those days, city was taken as a state. State concept, the nation concept was not there. It was a city concept. So he says, a city comes into being because each one of us is not self-sufficient to fulfill their needs. So in other words, people have to take sport to fulfill their needs into many aspects from others. So that brings the concept of planning. That brings the concept of organizing. And that brings the concept of interacting and negotiating with the other people so that needs can be fulfilled. ठीक है? Needs, theories, motivation, theories, hierarchy of need. Remember Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of need? This was presented in the 1960s. But the basic concept is coming of the need from the Greek philosopher Plato, 460 BC. Then comes the Socrates, very well-known, famous Greek philosopher. He argued that the management principles should be universal. Why? Because humans are universal. Yes, they have different color, they have different shades, they live in different cities and states, they work in different organizations. But he urged people to look into and understand the concept of universality of management. So if, for example, people of Athens, remember we are talking of Greek, people of Alexandria, and Alexandria was also part of the Greek Empire in those days. If they have to work and plan and organize the resources, say, to build a coliseum, to build an auditorium. Those were the times when people were going to auditoriums to watch the matches, to see how very strong people would play their games. The coliseums ka idea, auditoriums ka idea, theaters ka idea is a Greek idea. And what he's saying is that there must be a universality of management. And the third scholar, very well known in the Greek philosophy, is Aristotle. And then we see the concept of the school coming in the city of Athens. The first school which was given the concept by Aristotle was the Lyceum. And the Lyceum was the school in Athens. He wrote in his book, Politics, that the executive powers and functions, they must be culture dependent. So executive must have a power, authority. And there must be some functions to be performed. But now here comes the culture. Culture is playing its role. So it's a culture dependent. And the concept of power, as we see in the West versus the East, we see in the Indian philosophy or the Chinese philosophy, you find them, culture has its own effect on the power. And then within a state and among the states, within a city. Remember, those days, city was a state. And among the states. Let's take an example from the Aristotle that if you have to argue, if you have to present an argument, and remember when you're doing research, you always have your argument, your idea, and you have to convince them. So he said, logic should be either inductive or deductive. Same kind of logic which you will use in qualitative or quantitative research. Quantitative research, most of the time, we use deductive logic. Qualitative research, where you go for a theory development, you may use inductive. We'll talk about that later on. But speaking of Aristotle, and speaking of these Greek philosophers, they presented to us that leadership is also important. Remember the third function of management, leading? Leadership and the leadership virtues should be on the basis of competence, should be on the basis of courage, integrity, character, fairness, and wisdom. यानी लीडर जो है उसका कैरेक्टर भी होना चाहिए, लीडर के अंदर विजडम भी होनी चाहिए, लीडर के अंदर फेयरनेस भी होनी चाहिए. These are the Greek concepts of leadership given by the Greek philosophers. And you find some of these concepts even prevailed today in the leadership literature, in the leadership theories. When you compare transactional versus transformational, you find some of these virtues there. Now, leader could not be everywhere, every time. Yes, we know it. Remember, those were the days when the leader was person-focused. But they should appoint their ministers, their counselors, their advisors. And by doing so, they will be able to manage. For example, the city of Phoenix and the other city-states, one person may play the role of a priest. Same person would be rowing the praise and conducting business as a trader. He would be working as a banker, civil administrator, and a war leader. Because he is a leader. He must be able to lead the prayer in the temple. He must be able to lead the business. And if it's a war between the states, he should be able to lead the war. And of course, when we compare this time of the Greek philosophy with the philosophy given by the Moses in the Old Testament, in the cities of Babylon, you will find the codes and the rules were legal codes because they were given in the Old Testament. So you have to compare the rules and the codes given to Moses at that time, or the rule and the codes and the degrees which are being developed by the scholars and the kings. याद रखिए, अभी ईसा अलैहिस्सलाम नहीं आए. And that's what we are talking before Christ. And we have reached at a time when it's about 300 BC. Thank you.